Right, let's jump straight into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the invisible architectures of modern behavioral control. We are basically piecing together a totally wild, declassified puzzle found right in the source documents. And it connects clandestine intelligence programs, the birth of the surveillance state, and, believe it or not, the weather itself. So, our central question comes right out of the historical blueprints. How exactly did the quest for mind control birth the modern surveillance state? We're looking directly at the declassified archives here to see how intelligence experiments from decades ago literally evolved into the reality we live in right now.
Section 1. Hacking the Human Mind, the Biochemical Frontier. Let's get into it. You see, the story doesn't actually begin with microchips. It begins with chemistry. According to declassified records, a guy named Sidney Gottlieb ran the CIA's Technical Services Division during MKUltra, and he earned the pretty grim nickname, the Poisoner-in-Chief. Gottlieb directed a program that secretly administered massive doses of LSD, which they internally coded as P1, to completely unwitting targets. The strategy here was a chilling three-step process. First, administer the P1 without the target having a clue. Second, wait for this massive dose to induce what they called a severe classic paranoid reaction. And third, because the subject was now acting incredibly erratically, authorities could seamlessly elicit a mental illness diagnosis from outside completely uninvolved psychiatrists. So by artificially inducing madness, they completely discredited that individual's political or social influence. It was quite literally character assassination via biochemistry. Now, what's really staggering here is the sheer, sweeping scale of this behavioral technocracy. MKUltra wasn't just a handful of LSD experiments. Subproject 2, for example, literally hired professional stage magicians to teach agents sleight of hand for secretly dropping pills into drinks. You had Subproject 94 working on literal brain implants, and 119 looking into remote bioelectric signals. They were trying to map every single conceivable vulnerability of the human condition. Section 2. The biometric evolution, from hardware to software. But look, the state's goal was never to just stay biochemical, right? Drugs are messy, unpredictable. The crucial pivot was moving from physical biological hardware to digital software. The sources detail how early experiments with things like stimulosievers, which were basically microchip implants used to remote control animals, eventually hit a wall. So the funding pivoted to an AI researcher named Woody Bledsoe. He created this mathematical model called the standard head, which measured facial coordinates. So yes, the foundation of modern facial recognition software was birthed directly from the ashes of these mid-century mind control projects. Section 3. Subproject 130. Mapping the psychic topography. To really track the software of human identity, they needed a map of our psychology. The intelligence community relied on an early cognitive and IQ test called the Wechsler-Bellevue system for a process they termed indirect assessment. Now that is just a bureaucratic euphemism. What it really meant was that they were covertly profiling and categorizing human personality types entirely without the subject's knowledge or consent. Now you might be wondering, why does this matter to us today? Well, because by charting this invisible topography, the intelligence apparatus learned how to treat the inner psyche of the average, unwitting citizen as a highly manageable data set. They refined their psychological operations, learning exactly which levers to pull to covertly target, recruit, or neutralize very specific types of people. Basically, your personality became a quantifiable metric for social control. Section 4. Engineering Crises and Consent, Subproject 126, and the Biosphere. Let's zoom out from the individual for a second and look at society at large. We're looking at MKUltra Subproject 126, which was known as the disaster study. Researchers analyzed over 140 mass traumas, things like earthquakes, bombings, epidemics, and they found that devastated communities organically generate what they termed a therapeutic social milieu. Basically, people naturally come together, they form communal solidarity, and they rebuild after a profound shock. But here's the catch. The intelligence community didn't just want to observe this resilience, they wanted to learn how to co-opt it. Based on the texts, we have to ask a massive hypothetical question here. The sources note vast investments into weather modification over the years. So if an authority possesses atmospheric technologies, let's say something capable of manipulating rain or wind, like HARP for instance, and simultaneously, insurance or government bodies have access to vast troves of our data, let's just say they also have your voting records, medical history, biometric profiles, all of it. What could they theoretically do to engineer our consent? The historical blueprints from the disaster studies suggest a highly effective, albeit theoretical, sequence. Step 1. Initiate a localized ecological shock. Step 2. Wait for the traumatized public's vulnerability and spontaneous need for solidarity. Step 3. Step in to manage that therapeutic social milieu. By controlling the recovery structures, an authority could seamlessly manipulate a disoriented, heavily monitored public into willingly accepting entirely new paradigms of statecraft and behavioral control. It's a real game changer.
Section 5. Psychedelics and Social Feedback. Subproject 58. Now, let's look at how these covert operations actually accidentally altered the cultural software of the nation in a profound, completely unintended feedback loop. We learned from the sources that the famous 1970s psychedelic pioneer Terence McKenna, and specifically his famed La Chirera expedition into the Amazon, was actually sparked by reading a 1957 Life magazine article on magic mushrooms. But here is the crazy twist. The author's botanical research for that article was secretly funded by the CIA's Subproject 58 through a shell fund, so the counterculture's defining catalyst was inadvertently funded by the state itself. No way, right?
As the texts point out, this created a phenomenon of high weirdness. You had both counterculture seekers looking for spiritual enlightenment and the deep state looking for totalized control, but both were exploring the exact same frontiers of human consciousness. The medium of the intelligence operation accidentally broadcast a message that basically reprogrammed an entire generation.
Section 6, McLuhan and the Electric Age, the Totalized Environment.
And that brings us to the visionary media theorist Marshall McLuhan. McLuhan warned that our conventional response to media is entirely a distraction. He said it's like a juicy piece of meat carried by a burglar to distract the watchdog of the mind. Based on the sources, if he were looking at the state of the government and the world compared to his era, he would absolutely view today's totalized environment of algorithms, data harvesting, and atmospheric tech as the ultimate programmable medium of control.
McLuhan would look at our world right now and warned that we are trapped in what he brilliantly termed Narcissus Narcosis. It's essentially a zombie stance. We blindly embrace these new technologies and extensions of the state as if we are merely servo-mechanisms to our own tech. We totally fail to see how this environment is silently molding our very humanity and pushing us toward conformity. But McLuhan also offered a solution. As outlined in the sources, he argued that we have to drop our rearview mirror approach to progress. We need to recognize the invisible programming of our environment, step out of this subliminal trance, and actively turn our intellectual ivory towers into control towers. In short, we have to dictate our environment before it dictates us. So, I leave you with this final, provocative thought based on everything we've unpacked from the sources today. Between the biochemical foundations of MKUltra, the transition to biometric surveillance, and the sheer potential for engineered social crises, have we already become permanent servo-mechanisms to this engineered environment? Or can we still wake up from the Narcissus Narcosis? Really think about that the next time you look at the technology sitting right in your hand.